Say hello to your North American victors, PolarBearMike and United.
Mike, thank you so much for being here, man. Super appreciate you doing this with me. It's an absolute pleasure. You have been hailed as one of the best support players to ever play Smite, ever touch Smite. You've been on many top teams, even winning the last Smite 1 World Championship here in 2024. Your journey as a support main, how did it begin? Did you even start off as a support player?
I did. So I used to play, the only game that was even remotely similar, like combat-wise, to Smite that I played was World of Warcraft, and I would always just play tank roles in that game. So I kind of knew that I liked that playstyle in general. I played a little bit of solo. I mean, I played a little bit of everything when I was originally grinding, but I really like I kind of like that support is like its own style. Like it's the only role where you're kind of not playing selfishly and just like vacuuming up farm. And I also feel like you're just engaged more, like you're actually fighting more often. So I pretty much mained it from the start, honestly.
Yeah, no, that's what I often tell people too. Like, I feel like every role has to play selfless to a certain extent. But like support's entire style is selfless play, right? Like dive for the carries, don't overtake farm, all that kind of jazz. Did you ever feel like switching roles at any point in your career?
The only time I wanted to was when it was mostly season 8, and it was never like serious, but season 8 kind of pissed me off a little bit because they like added like map wide Invaders curse, and duo lane in my opinion was just not very like interactive. Most duo lane metas at pro play at least tend to be like whoever gets to the lane first wins the lane based off like jungle clear or whatever else. So to me it just wasn't that entertaining, and at that time the jungle meta was like Gilgamesh, Erlong, Osiris, just like literally running it down mid. Like you would literally blink on the mid laner at level 2, brawl to the death, and then just like play pressure and run the map. And to me, that's just way more fun and way more like interactive. So that's the only time where I was like, damn, I kind of wish I was a jungler playing these tanks. It would be fun.
Yeah, no, I could. I remember that when you were playing like Fenrir, I think it was like season 6 or 7. There was like one set where you soloed one of the ADCs next to their T2, and everybody was like freaking out that you were just like soloing ADCs.
Those were the days, man. Thorns was so broken back then too. You would just go like blink Thorns and everyone was just dead. It was nice.
Yeah. Not for ADC players, but for the tank mains for sure.
Screw them. Who cares?
Yeah. Or why are you hitting me with Thorns anyways, right?
Yeah.
Dude, you're also like the prime like Herc support main. Was it like season 6, 7? When you would like walk at the enemy speed buff. But that's also why they added Invaders Curse. So like, yeah, I know that you hate Invaders Curse, but overall, what do you think about that playstyle? Because I feel like it was a bit of a more like linear playstyle. Like you either draft a pressure support or you lose the game.
So I think the sad thing was that's how it would boil down in ranked, which is like ultimately why I don't really blame them for it. Like I think if you and I were queuing ranked games and people could do that, it'd be super boring, I think. To me, I just care more about like the pro meta. For example, something that I had tried to like pitch to an extent was like just not having Invaders Curse in like a custom game setting or something, so that like we could play with it. Because if you go watch the initial like big invade meta in season 6, even in Worlds Finals, if you watch like stuff me and Neil were playing, like we were invading on like Xing Chen, Fafnir, Khepri. Like I would invade on Khepri like every game as well. And it was like, of course, a character like Herc would be better at that. But what it kind of boiled down to is once people knew what they were doing, it was really easy to trade the map pretty evenly. And like, it was just like moving chess pieces around a little bit. So I think in that regard, it kind of gets better over time. And players also, one thing I think people take for granted is people learn quicker than they think. Like even if they're just like a ranked player and you're just playing for fun, or you're just like a casual player, people learn and adapt to these starts and things like way quicker than I feel like anyone gives them credit for. And I think with time, it actually would have gotten a lot better and games wouldn't have been as volatile. Like, for example, they added The chest camp. I forget what
Yeah.
it's actually called, but like the chest, the like bounty changes they did in season 10. Like there's a lot of other ways to combat Snowball that I think they've done a good job of. To me, I just don't like the feeling of it's not about invading as much as like just doing the same start every game. Like I don't want to sit at my purple and green buff for like literally a minute before minions spawn and just wait there to hit it. I like to be able to move around, do other things. So that's just my perspective personally. I do think there's something to be said for a balance. I don't think it's good if any meta is just like super stale. Like I don't think it's good if you have to pick like Hercules and Fenrir and Serket and Horus and just like run it down at level 1. But I also don't think it's good when we had metas like I think most of season 8 and season 9 was pretty much just like Capri, Yamoja every single game, like play backline peel. There really wasn't another viable option for you to do.
Yeah, I know Yamoja for sure because she was broken for like 3
Mhm.
seasons straight.
Yeah.
And I think like season 10 was a lot of that too. I mean, it was called like the year of the elephant by Aurora a little bit. I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess like no, you're definitely right about that. I do think people learn faster than they think they do, and I do think that maybe high res sort of like catering to I want to call it more of like the noob style where it's like anti snowball, like helping people out by giving them those chest camps and making it so there's invaders curse and you can invade. I guess like that's not the best. It's probably best to just let players learn the game themselves and try to adapt as well.
Yeah, I would be interested what the community thinks. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a game and people should have fun playing the game, right? And if there's something within the game that's making people have a bad time whenever they queue up, like kind of the same thing I had said at the very start of it. Like I didn't like queuing ranked when it was that invade meta. And that's like, I'd have the power if I'm playing against a ranked jungler who doesn't scrim or play comp or that meta at all. I could win the game in the first 30 seconds of the game by myself if I wanted to, but it's not fun for me either because like I'm not getting practice from it. Like I'm not getting anything to apply to comp, and then you just know you're ruining everybody else's time. So it's like, at the end of the day, you want the game to be fun above all else, right? That's why we're playing a video game.
Right. Of course. Of course. What's your opinion on the concept of luck and how big a role do you think it plays when getting to a professional level?
Um, it's an interesting question. I think it's kind of like an unfortunate thing in life in general that
Mhm.
like connections do just matter, right? Like when it comes to even getting like a job interview, for example, like who can matter a lot. So I do think there's some degree of luck in that, even though I would also say like you can kind of make your own luck, right? Like for example, I think it's very easy to just like play ranked and be nice to people. Like if you're queuing ranked and you're being like a shithead and you're just flaming everybody and you're like trying to play comp, then you're kind of trolling, right? Like you're doing yourself no favors there. I do think there has to be luck. For me, my luck was that Aurora didn't want to play with Anatoly, so he quit. Like, and then I got a spot. Like that's literally how I started my SPL career, and that was luck. And when I took that spot, like I originally was on it was Challenger Cup was what it was called back then, and they were just like weekly tournaments, and you would get points off of doing well in the weekly tournaments. And there were the first 3 weeks, and my team had won all 3 weeks. So we were gonna play. I think they still did relegations back then, and it was bottom 2 SPL versus top 2 Challenger Cup. And the bottom SPL team was awful. Like they did actually get relegated going into the fall. And I remember when Aurora had quit, like something I actually thought was, well, I think I'm going to relegate this team anyway. Should I just stay on my Challenger Cup team? Because I thought Eager would replace me. And going to the luck thing again, they were trying to replace me. They were trying to get Ionic to leave TSM at the time, but he couldn't due to, I don't know if it was contract stuff or like with TSM or if it was roster lock stuff, but he ended up not leaving. They couldn't find anyone else, so they kept me, and then we ended up finishing stuck in that split in NA. And the only I think like AFK beat us by like one game, but we won like the season series against them. So if we would have won the tiebreaker, so we were nearly first seed, and it was like, I wouldn't have known that was going to happen. It was just luck.
Yeah, but like I think skill also sort of opens the door too, right? Because obviously if you
Yeah,
don't have the skill, then you're not going to be the one that they're picking up. It's going to be somebody else.
for sure. I think people's attitude matters a lot too. Like I think people can tell when you are just like trying to be a good teammate and you are trying to like learn and listen to what people have to say. I think that's a really respectable quality, an admirable quality, like in any walk of life. Just like treating people kindly, listening to what they have to say, super important.
What was the best or most memorable piece of advice you were given starting out? In other words, what advice helped you to become the player that you are today?
Um, so if people are old heads, they'll know this name, but the main way I learned a lot was I used to snipe Shadow Q, who was a pro support player for like, I guess maybe like 2 years before official launch. Like he was definitely in closed beta and open beta, and then like season 1, 2, 3, and even 4 of SPL, I think. So I mean, he was around for a while. And season 2, I used to snipe his Qs all the time, and I was friendly with him because I would be in his chat all the time, and he would actually like talk to me between games about like the laning phase, like what I could do better, or anything like that. Um, and he gave me a bunch of really good advice, and he was actually the person who told me to take the eager spot when Aurora had left. When I was thinking about staying for the relegation thing, he was the one who I asked for advice on that because I thought they would replace me, and he had just basically told me to like obviously like grind a good bit, but to always focus on just like kind of having fun. Like I'm sure you've had it too, where you're just queuing ranked and you're just having a crappy day and you're frustrated. Like when you're in that mindset, it's normally good to just take a break because you'll just, you're going to overwhelm yourself, you're going to burn out, and then it just doesn't help you. You're going to end up typing things to people that you don't want to type, like it just doesn't get good. So I think trying to actually like focus on having fun when you're grinding is really important. And also, I think something people could do a lot more, and what I try to do a lot is honestly really listen. I know it'll sound ironic because I'm super in my older years. I'm definitely more like a stubborn old head a little bit. Um, but I think like asking questions to people, I'm sure you've experienced it too, but like you can kind of tell like when you're streaming and people ask you questions, like I personally love that a little
Yeah.
bit. Like I feel like it's really fun when you can tell people are like really trying to learn and they're interested in what you have to say. And when they're like, some people ask a question and they ask it to like get validation, and they're like, oh, like, can you believe my teammates like inted my game, or whatever else, I'm like stuck in elo hell. And some people will ask like, hey, like, why do you build this item compared to like this item? Why do you think this relic is better than this other relic, whatever. And I think that's kind of the beauty of streaming and YouTube and everything like that in general, like the ability to interact with people who have played longer than you have and be able to like kind of leech knowledge off them, I think is a really cool and unique thing to esports in general.
Yeah, definitely. And it's that learning opportunity. One thing I tell people too is, if you ask me a question, it's actually a good idea too to go to other, say, support streams like you, for example, Mike, or like Genetics or somebody, and maybe even ask the same question and kind of see what they say as well, and sort of get like a correlation of like if there's anything that all three, all four, whatever people say. And I think that's like also a really good way to help learn, because it's like, okay, if these four streamers that I'm watching are saying it, it's probably true, right? Because everybody has their own opinion on it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Also, because I used to say this about Captain Twig all the time when we teamed together, was we had very different thought processes, but we would land at very similar conclusions. And I always thought that was interesting because you can kind of see the difference in what people value. So like, let's say someone asked you and I the same question about, what relic you thought was good. I might think like horrific is good because I want to dive people and kill them and like force their beads with the slow. You might think horrific is good because it anti-heals and it reduces damage and it's just a good like peel relic. And both can be true. And the conclusion you're probably going to land on is that thing is busted, I'm going to buy it.
Yeah.
Which is actually the case. It is actually broken. But yeah, like you can see different answers and different thought processes from people. And when you see a common theme there, it also helps you realize like, oh, well, I actually like playing, this way over that way. So I'll like, maybe relate more to what one person says over another. So yeah, I think it's definitely good to get a whole picture of it.
Yeah. I also like the fact too, it's like if you're thinking about like relics and you look at shell and med, it's like, well, this kind of just counters both too, because you're just not getting full shell value, you're not getting full med
Yep.
value,
Yeah.
it's just so good. And actually, real quick, what was your opinion, now that we're on relics, what was your opinion on them sort of reducing the overall relic count and making specific relics way better?
Um, I think it's good from a bloat perspective. I think when there's too many options and too many different routes to go, I think it's really hard for people who are learning the game to be able to take in all that information. I just think it's kind of complexity for the sake of complexity. For example, it used to be way worse. In later seasons, the green Ankh, the one that left pools on the ground, was actually pretty good. But season 8 and 9, it was horrible. It would do no damage. It was worse anti-heal. It was lower duration. Everything about it was worse. And that alone, if you know you need anti-heal and you pick one of those relics and you pick the green Ankh instead of the purple Ankh, you're instantly in a worse spot. And I think stuff like that is kind of unnecessary. Combining that and just having that be simple and just removing a layer of decision making. It's kind of the item shop is a little different, right? If you're going first item, let's say it's Thebes versus Archdruids or some hybrid damage item, that's a really clear choice. Do I want an aura or do I want damage? Whereas those sort of relic decisions are, do I know this one is good and this one's trash, or am I just picking wrong? And it just hurts the player instantly. It's not actually a playstyle decision. So I think from that aspect it was good. I think the flip side of that is I think Horrific specifically just does everything, it has the anti-shield of Sunder, it had the anti-heal from Ankh, it has the damage reduction, which ends up being good to peel, and it has a slow as well. So it's you compare that to Barrier, which has a slow and then increases auto attack damage. It's just not even close what Horrific can do compared to that. So I think from that perspective, it made a superhero relic, but I think all that can be adjusted with numbers and balance. Overall, I think it's good for the average player. I think high end variety hurts a little bit because of it, but I think that's a fair trade-off.
You've been through a few iterations of the Jade Dragons, dating all the way back to its formation. Which one was your favorite?
The most fun was Spring Season 8, and that was because we were all just really good friends. That's when we had picked up Hurry. And they also, I don't know who we paid, but they mega buffed Janus, which was his main. Yeah, and yeah. I think we literally had 100% win rate on it and 100% pick ban rate. We would either first pick it and win, or you would have to ban it. So that was really funny. That was just a funny team in general. Only for the spring split, we ended up having a bunch of issues later on that year that made it not as fun. I think in terms of the try-hard level of it, last year the season 10 version was my favorite. I think that was the first time, honestly, in my career that it was the worst regular season I've ever had in general, and I think it was also the first time that I really struggled to get on the same page with people and vice versa. And I think that type of struggle actually helped us a lot because we spent a lot of extra effort watching VODs, talking to each other, spending time after games discussing what we think we could do differently. And it kind of reminded me of initially trying to get into the pro league and just that initial grind and having to figure things out. That was the first time I had felt that in pretty much a decade. So I think for that reason, the actual comp part of it last year would be my favorite.
Definitely. And actually speaking onto that as well, you said it was the worst regular season that you've probably had. Mm-hmm. Usually you guys, you in particular, you guys have a very strong regular season, and then something kind of happens, I think, towards the end of the seasons, where it starts to sort of go downwards. Mm-hmm. What do you think that is?
Well, it's kind of weird. So my rookie year, which was season 2 through season 5, it was the exact opposite for me. Every spring split I had was really bad. I would never make the early tournaments in the year. For example, something I'll joke about is Scream picking Arachne cost me a free trip to Spain, in the summer. And we always did poorly in the spring and summer, and then normally the world splits we would do really well. And I think what kind of flipped that is after we won Worlds in season 4, and then I think season 5 we had post World slump, so we just had a bad spring split the first few games, and then after that, all the people who I was teaming with, I think, were just way more experienced than other teams, just because the game had been out longer, and a lot of the pro players had been around longer. And I think we were really quick at picking up metas and kind of figuring out what was really broken and abusing it really early on. And then I think later in the year, I think some of those teams struggled with patches a little bit. Like, for example, the rival year, which was season 6, we had it was like a mage ADC meta, and Arkle was just like a sick hunter player. Like, he was like a kill pressure hunter player, like Uller on her, that type of style. And the item people were rushing was like literally a physical defense, like power hybrid item in like the mage ADC role. And we just like couldn't play the game because it just like completely screwed how we wanted to play. So there had been stuff like that happened, like season 7, kind of a similar thing. I was playing like Herc the whole year and like RDO and stuff, and they both got nerfed right before Worlds, and you kind of get stuff like that. Honestly, I think for the most part, like it's kind of weird looking back on it because I will be disappointed with results as well. But then if I'll like kind of zoom out a little bit, even those years where we had bad Worlds, like we still, like, I've won a tournament every year for the past like 4 or 5 seasons or something like that, like at least one tournament or one split or both. And it's kind of hard to like end a season and be like, oh, we won a major tournament this season, freaking sucked, like what a disappointment. But it really did always feel like that. I think specifically that like rival Ghost team, I do kind of think nerves got to people a little bit. I think we definitely just didn't handle some moments as like calmly as we needed to. And then the Dragons teams, honestly, I just don't think we were good enough. Like season 8, we just weren't good enough, I think, for a bunch of reasons. I think that was just a really hard year. I don't think it was like a player skill thing. I think it was just like external stuff that we had going on in each other's personal lives. I think it just made it a hard year. And then season 9, yeah, kind of same thing. Like we picked up Scream and we won like 13 or 14 sets in a row. The meta shifted pretty hard, and then we had like a team identity like crisis issue, which also happened before we had picked up Scream, and it was just we just weren't as quick to adapt to things.
Yeah, when I was talking with Fano the other month, he was saying that you guys had some like nasty stuff cooking up in season 9, and then the meta completely changed to like 9.5.
Well, Daniel, like, or Pegon, I guess I should call him, like, I do think he kind of changed mid lane forever a little bit. Like, we were really the first, like, you look back on season 10 and there was like an assassin mid meta where people were playing like Pele and Kama and Set and stuff like that. But we were really the first team to do that every game. Like, you would get teams who played like Set mid, for example, in like season 7. That was pretty popular. Like, Paul would play it a good bit, for example. But it was really only that one character in a specific comp. People would play like either Set or the Morgan with Cthulhu, and that was kind of like the only comp you would run that with. And we would just play like any assassin mid, or like Gilgamesh, for example. Like, we would play Gilgamesh and Susano mid, and we would just have Daniel like play on it, and he would just, I think he soloed literally every mid laner except for Paul that split. Like his first like rookie split, he was just going off. And we had a lot of things we were doing with like lane swapping people like mid game as well. Like if Alec was in like a physical versus magical matchup and he was the magical and he was building physical defense, we would like have him and Panda lane swap after his first item, and then I would lane with Alec when we would have like double physical defense against their hunter and then sprint it down that lane. Then like Daniel was pretty much playing a jungler, so sometimes we'd play like a double jungle game, and I would play a character that could like clear waves in mid and then roam like rotate later or something like that. I don't know. We had a bunch of different weird stuff we were doing. And then patch 9.5 happened and the kill pressure just wasn't the same. Like it wasn't about actually solo killing the mid laner. It was about the threat of it. Like the threat of Daniel being able to solo their mid laner made them play under tower, and then he can clear first and then rotate first. And then like we're threatening ganks, we're threatening pulling objectives, playing corners, invades, any of that type of stuff. But when they're not afraid of dying, that all goes away. Like when a ranged clear character isn't afraid of dying to you all in Inyo, they can just walk up to the wave, one shot it, and then you're the one who's rotating late to everything. So that was really difficult and super frustrating. And then I think a similar thing happened later in the year, actually, where Daniel was playing a lot of like Yu Huang and stuff, and we were playing a lot of like kind of combo mages, along with Scream was playing like Cleo and Suki, and we were playing like very late game junglers. Like, I think most people thought of us as an early game team, but we were playing like very, very late game stuff with those two specifically. And then like a hunter mid meta started, and it was like Stern, Ishtar, literally every game in either duo or mid or both. And kind of same thing. Like a lot of that team, we just tried to play around Pegon, and it kind of it kind of got shot a little bit by patches, like one before Worlds and one before the spring tournament, which was 9.5.
Yeah, I remember too. Like AMC was a really, really big like proponent in mid lane too. We
That
were
character
playing
was
AMC.
so broken, man.
He was so bad. I think it was like a 30% prot shred on
Yeah.
his stinger on release. Absolutely
Yeah.
ridiculous. In your opinion, what was the hardest obstacle to overcome for the Jade Dragons in season 10? Like leading up to the Worlds event.
It's gonna sound dumb, but I think focus. Like, I think when I say this, like I feel like I can flame them now because it ended well, but like they were so bad at like playing with like pace, I guess I would call it, or like tempo. I don't know what you want to call it, but like Dardo specifically would just do the dumbest stuff. Like he would stay with like low mana too long, or he just wouldn't back on good timers to be ready for buff invades, or people would just literally like farm the map inefficiently, stuff like that. And I was very used to the opposite. So like for example, when we had Captain Twig in mid, like the map was just so smooth because we basically had two junglers and I was playing like invade supports, like very high pressure supports most of the year. And like the whole like our map was just cleared constantly. Like we never had to worry about like having bad back timings, or it was never hard to get people to group up for an invade. Like everything was just so smooth. We were just on pace. Like everything was just very quick. And I think people really underestimate how valuable those sort of things are. Like, you know, if I see the mid laner at 0 mana and I know they have to back, I can call a Gold Fury off of it, right? We're just up a number just instantly. Like, if I know that you're farming the map a certain way and I ward your back harpies and I see your jungler and mid laner splitting every single back harpy and I know there's two people on that side of the map plus a soul laner, I'm going to pull Gold Fury again. Like, there's just so many small things that you can do. And having the map be really quick and really smooth, like I'd say it's something the Oni Warriors, like the Jake version, did really well last year. Like they would just play corners, and it was because the map was so quick. Because you would get people like Pegon who would push mid, he would do some of the jungle for Panatom, and Panatom would just go to Jake. They'd play corners on the duo side of the map. They'd find a pick. Suddenly, you find a pick. Now you can pull an objective. Now somebody is going to overreact, face pulling, like face checking the objective. Now you can kill that person. That's a second kill, and now suddenly you can tower dive their ADC, and then that tower is gone, and the game's over in like 10 minutes. Like it's done. And those sort of things just snowball really hard, and we were really bad at all of that. And I remember there was a week of scrims where Horus got really buffed. It was really broken, and there was a week where I only played Horus every single scrim, and I would literally like rage pick it until they would like play pressure with me and invade the jungle and like actually just pull objectives off cooldown. And we had like a 10% win rate on it. It was horrible. Like it was going so bad. To be fair, some games were because I trolled a little bit. Like we would get ahead and then I would just like autos into their Titan and like just be an idiot. But we were just like genuinely bad at it. Like we were bad at like playing with pace and playing with tempo, and it was because I think the European players in general, like they were more laxed and they would take games a lot slower. And I think there is a good like lesson for that, and there is a lot of value in that. And I do think it made me like a better player to adapt to that. But I think if it wasn't for me pushing that the whole year, like our game 5 against the Warriors, for example, where we played like Atlas and Pele, like if we played that probably 2 months earlier, we would lose it every time, because we just like it was something that we needed to keep working on and like keep getting better at. And that was, for me, that was like the main way I think all of my teams would really like kind of gap people, would just be like map play in general, just being very quick and playing with pressure and playing with pace. And it was really weird to just be horrible at that.
Yeah, it's funny. It's not just Smite too. I've noticed in like every sort of esports league that the EU teams are always just slower than NA. It's like Smite, and like there's so many other games too. It's just the style that they have, I guess. I don't know.
I mean, it definitely is like there is value in it for sure, and I think it is honestly because of ranked. Like I do think ranked in NA for most games is more troll. People just kind of deathmatch. So I think it's not like a learned skill until you get into comp play. But there's definitely pros and cons to both.
Was there a goal that you had for yourself going into season 10? Like obviously, winning worlds is on everyone's mind, but more of like a self-improvement goal.
Honestly, exactly what I said about like playing slower. So from my perspective, like my teammates maybe won't share this the same. This would mainly be conversations I would have like with our coaches, which was Kabam and Cherry. But when season 8 patch hit, and I like read the notes after season 7 Worlds, and there was like the Invaders curse stuff, and there were just a bunch of other changes they had did to like relics and starter items and all those sort of things. Like that was the first year of starter upgrades and like Sentinel's Embrace and like Compassion and all those things. And I kind of instantly said, like, I think we need to shift our play style, and I want to play more like backline supports, and I want to play Peel, and I want to have like I think our pressure should go through like jungle, and that was even before like the warrior stuff. And it was just kind of like a play style distinction because that team was used to me being like the engager and being the person who was kind of running the map and playing pressure. And you know, same thing with Sam. Like Sam was used to having like me or Neil or whoever set up the map for him, and then he would play like Susano and Thor and Humbots, and then he could play these like late game junglers and just be a carry player. And I think it kind of had like a style conflict between that team and like what I actually thought was good in my role or wanted to do as a player. I would even say it with like FineOK, for example. Like I think one of the best traits of FineOK is that he's super, super flexible and can play like any character, any like class type in his role, and he's really good at just having like really niche counter picks that people just don't play against ever. Like I remember his not his rookie year, his our first split together on Rival, we would play like Circuit solo and stuff and just like do these random picks. And a lot of that relied on having me also be an engager with him, like having a character who can like go in, set stuff up for him and create space. And I think that was kind of a puzzle we never really solved. Just like switching my playstyle and also keeping like our core team identity together. So when we moved to season 10, or I moved to season 10, I really wanted to just be able to like play the style that I thought was good, which was playing more like backline, or I'd call it like more mid fight is kind of what I like to do. Like Baron is a really good example of it, where you can like, if you have a good matchup on the front line, you have really good like poke or CC or like kill threat with your ult on whatever frontliners you're on. But then I would like turn and want to peel and use like defensive relics on my carries. Like Khepri kind of same way. Like you can opt somebody diving, but you can also like, you know, just sit on your back line and just be a relic bot on them. So it was more that type of style that I wanted to play. And to me, the struggle with it was getting game states in a good spot where like we could actually play like the mid game pretty well, I guess. Because what it ended up becoming is like Afro is such a good example of what I'm talking about. Like we really struggled with Afro, and everybody, if you're a Redditor, you think I'm like the worst player ever and you never want to see me play the character and all that type of stuff. And it's like a perfect example of why I thought that character was broken, because when you play Afro and you link your jungler in the early game and you play a corner together and you find literally anybody in the jungle, they will die. Like if you have a 2v1 and you had like the original like rekit of Afro and you have like a Susano linked to you, like that person is dead, and you could just like play corners. You could play a lot of pressure with it. But that team just really wanted to like play slow. Like they didn't want to take risks. They were just very slow around the map. So it ended up just becoming I'm playing Afro linked to my ADC, which is just not what I wanted to do with the character at all. And I think it was a really hard adaptation for both of us to like find a middle ground there. But it is ultimately like it is what I went into that season wanting. It was just harder than I like thought it would be.
Yeah, dude, I swear, Jangaru and Priv were like the kings at playing corners in the SEC. Got me every single time.
It's so annoying, dude. The hardest player for me to play against last year was actually Quig, because I swear to God, no matter what team he was on, Quig would always be with his jungler, and they would just play a corner with like on me. It would either be Quig and Oath or Quig and Twig later on, and he would counterpick me every single game, and then they would camp corners around duo, and I just like had no freedom on the map. That stuff is so like it's so oppressive to support players. It's broken.
Yeah, we scrimmed against Quick's team a few times, and every time like I would always get counterpicked too. I'm just like, guys, can I like bottom two, please? Because like Quick's just counterpicking me. It's not fun.
Yep.
In terms of like metas, how hard in general is it for you or like a team to adapt to a certain meta? Because I feel like that really drives different levels of play in Smite.
I think it's actually not that hard for each player individually, especially when it comes to like people who have been around for a while. Like I'll use Pegon as an example. Like the patch 9.5 thing, I think was really difficult for him specifically, because it was his rookie year and he only had one split so far. And it's not that he can't play other characters, it's that like you're not used to like instantly pivoting and knowing like what your reaction is or like having a plan B or anything like that. Whereas like someone like me or Roar who played for, 10 years in the Pro League, we've played through all of these metas where like, there's a good chance we've played every single Guardian, every single like Warrior, Mage, whatever in the tab that can be played support, and we can just like call back to that and like remember how we want to play it or what we want to do. The harder thing isn't the individual skill, it's how the team matches up. So like, the same way different junglers have play styles, right? Like there's some junglers who like, let's use adapting, for example, likes to play like late game carries, that type of stuff. Like he tends to be a little bit slower, want to farm more, compared to like maybe Panatom plays a ton of corners, or like Twig will just like run it down and just like play pressure. It's really figuring out like how to get your team style to match the character style. Same thing like the example I used with the mage meta in season 6 for ADCs. Like that was a really hard thing for us because we relied on, back then when it was a support meta, the ADCs were on an island. It was just a pure like 1v1 lane. So something we really relied on was having Arcole on like Uller or Anher. We just could leave him alone. We'd know he would win his 1v1. All we had to do was drop wards over there, and he would just threaten solo kills by himself, and he would have control of the map. He could invade purples by himself, do whatever he wanted. But when that meta shifted, it's not that he can't play mages, it's that the mages aren't soloing each other that much, and then we can't play the style that we want to play, and like having to figure out that is more the difficult part.
For season 10 in particular, were there some calls or plays that you made that ended up sort of putting your team in a worse position by accident up on the world stage?
Time.
Yeah,
all the time.
Any come to mind?
Game 2 against the Ferryman, we were stomping that game really hard, actually, and Coast and I were the main people with a lead. We got really ahead in duo. I think we were like level 6 when they were level 4. Not because we killed them, but we just stole their buffs like off cooldown. We were playing like on her Afro, I think. Or maybe it was Hachi and Afro. It was something like that. But anyways, we were really far ahead. And we were just playing off of our power spikes and like pulling Pyro whenever he could rotate, that sort of thing. And there ended up being one fight where we pulled a Pyro and killed people, and then Lass and Nika called fire, and both Coast and I hesitated. But Lass and Nika, like normally Coast and I would be the ones calling like objectives or when we wanted to do it. And we both hesitated and we just went for it. And then we kind of threw the game a little bit. Like we got the fire, but a bunch of us died. And then they kind of called a like tier 2 tower defense as well and inted on that. And then Coast kind of raged at them a little bit in game, which I think was good. And the game got back to a neutral state, and I made a call that I didn't want to fight the Ferryman comp in the jungle. I don't remember if that was another set mid game or what it was, but I remember saying I didn't want to fight in the jungle and that I wanted to fight in the lane. And so we started pushing mid, and nobody covered it, and we got to like their tier 2 tower, and they were all by like red buff on their side of the map, like red buff back harpies. And I knew that if we kept pushing, they would try to do fire. So I had called for Nika and Dardas to go stall their oh no, it was Nika and Laspera, or Dardas and Laspera. I don't know. Last was there though. I know that. I think it was Dardas and Las. I had called for them to stall their backs after they get fire, like let them get fire, then stop their backs, and we were going to try to end the game. And this was at like 25 minutes, and we were winning every like team fight up to that point. And I kind of just said fuck it, and like coin flipped the game. And I probably shouldn't have. I do still think, like, we all watched that playback, I do still think if we executed it correctly, we would have won the game there. But it was just like a dumb risk and not something you want to do when you're down 0-1 in world semis. So that's like probably the best example of my whole career, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I think when I was talking with Nika, he was saying that there were like a lot of coin flip plays that when you guys like stopped coin flip. I don't know if you guys used the term when you guys were talking with each other, because you both use the same term here, but yeah, he said that there were some coin flip plays, and when you guys stopped coin flipping, you guys were just kind of taking it home.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's good to coin flip if you can like if you can win the fight. It's pretty good to coin flip, I think, because ultimately what you want is to bait people in to fight you. Like, but there were sometimes it was bad. Like we would just coin flip fires when we had like Kakalkin, for example, and we just don't need to at all. And something we ended up learning this from the Ferryman in the qualifier tournament. I think there was a game where they played the Leviathans. It was the finals of that tournament, and the Levi's played like Uller, ADC, and Morgan Le Fay mid. and they just had like 0 fire giants secure, and the ferryman just split pushed the map, and Aurora and Paul just sat there because they had a Volcanaut. They just sat there, and if the Levi's ever committed to fire, Aurora would just walk in, hit the fire to tank it, and then they would Volcanaut it. Paul would walk away. They would just get fire and then have lanes pushed. And if you watch like game 1 against the Warriors, the amount of people I had come up to me at Worlds after that finals and tell me that was the most boring game they've ever watched was so funny. We like unironically went into the game, and I was like, we're just gonna wait for 3k pots and then we'll win the game, because they just couldn't do fire. We were after a Kakalkin. Dardas and I could just link together, sit there in the jungle, have everyone else farm and split push and get 3k pots, and if they ever pulled fire, I would walk in, hit it, and we would just Kakalkin alt it and walk away. So like that's kind of, we learned like instead of coin flipping fire because we have Kakalkin, they can just never do it because we have Kakalkin, and we'll just wait for 50 minutes. So yeah, sometimes maybe good, sometimes maybe shit. It's like the, you know.
Yeah. You live and you learn. That's why I love having like a secure mage, you know. I feel like you put your own destiny in your hands late game a little bit with the FG and the objectives. It just feels so good.
For sure.
Speaking of the ferrymen, in your opinion, who was your hardest matchup on the world stage out of all the teams that you played?
Definitely them. Definitely the ferrymen. I feel like we had a pretty big advantage over most teams that we would play late game just based off the characters that we would play. Ferrymen were just such a good late game team. A lot of it was they were kind of it was mostly Cyclone, and whether it's him or how they play with it as a team, Cyclone was kind of the main one that made it difficult, because we were pretty confident winning dual lane against every team and being in a good spot. But the Ferrymen, specifically with Chernobog, were just like a different team. It was just so hard to play against because they would just have Paul play like Thoth or Vulcan, and then have spin on Chernobog, and then they would just do all of these like split push plays. It didn't even matter if you got spin behind because you'd be split pushing the whole game. They were really good at using the ult in the late game. Like they had a bunch of plays in the regular season where they would have like the Morgan and Chernobog, and they would like have Cyclone split push, and if the soul laner tried to defend it, Paul would turn into Chernobog ult over. They would 2v1 kill the soul laner and end the game. Like they would just do a bunch of like random plays like that. And it was just too many things to account for. It was really difficult. And the issue with that was like, well, if you ban Bog, now you have to worry about like Emoja. Now that changes the way your team comps are playing. And then, you know, there's always like a Paul character maybe you don't want him to play, or, you know, whatever the case may be. So that team was just harder to draft against. Kind of because of Chernobog specifically. Pretty much every other team we didn't care about, but we just thought they were so good at it. It kind of just screwed how we wanted to play late game. So definitely them.
So from the camera point of view, you seem to be very active in the team huddles post matches. What are some of the things that you would tell the team in those huddles? And do you think it made a massive difference in allowing you guys to climb the bracket? Like, did you actually see gameplay and communication improvements in the following games based off what you said?
Yes. It's hard for me to tell how big of an impact it was, just because I'm not them, you know, for all I know, I'm just Captain. I do think it helped a lot, specifically because I always hate saying stuff like this because I feel like it sounds arrogant, but like I have played in 4 Worlds finals, I guess, up to that point. And I was definitely the most experienced person in that moment. And it's one thing to like be around for a long time and to be a good player and to have success in your career, which like, you know, it's not like any of them weren't used to that feeling, but it is just different. Like when you're in front of a crowd and there's different pressure and it's the end of your season one way or another, things just are different. Like it gets in your head. There's more anxiety to it, all of that type of stuff. So a lot of it was just trying to keep people calm and keep their confidence high and just making it simple. Like I know something that resonated with Nika, at least because he told me, was like when we were down 0-2 to Ferryman, I just told him to have fun. And like I could just tell like the tension was just too thick, and I was just like, we're gonna lose if we don't have fun. Like just I need you guys to like loosen up a little bit, is all I'm really trying to say. And at the time I'm just yapping, like that's just bullshit. But I mean it is kind of true. Like you do need to loosen up, you do need to like, you never want to be playing while thinking. Like you want to be playing off of instinct and like your gut feel. Like that's the whole reason we scrim a million times a year and like you practice, is because you want to be able to focus like on the game you're playing, not having to think about, you know, how you need to play your lane or your character. Like you just want all that stuff to be instinctual. So if you just focus on having fun and it's just like you're playing a rank game, especially for that guy over there in the soul lane, it would just be it would just be better for him. So most of it was just making it simple, keeping everybody calm, giving them confidence. I do think it mattered a lot. I just don't know how much because I'm not them, you know.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that was very well put. I think some of the time people tend to overthink. And
Yeah,
I'll probably just say leave the overthinking to the coaches. But
yeah,
like
pretty
when you're
much.
actually playing the game, it's very good to play based off instinct, and all that kind of jazz. I forgot, was it Nika that there was like one game during the World Championship where a soul laner was getting camped by the enemy jungler and just died off cooldown? Was that Nika in any of those games?
I think we camped Sot and killed him a
Oh
lot off
yeah, okay,
cooldown.
yeah.
I think it was mostly that, but I do know there was a lot of soul laner int plays for Totem,
Yeah.
because they were just reacting to the crowd. But yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, I asked Nick about that too. That like, how in your opinion, how integral was the crowd actually in helping you guys, or just in general?
For me, not that much. Not that it didn't matter, but I'd like completely like zone it out. Um, I think it did matter a lot though, actually. Like I think it mattered a lot for Nika. I think it mattered a lot for Coast and Lass. I don't know how much Darda's cared. That guy is like a robot, but
I'm just picturing
yeah,
Dardas as like expressions.
it just if you look at they send us like pictures, like a camera or like a photo album, I guess, like on Google after we won. Like there's maybe 2 pictures of Darda smiling. Like you're just not. He's just like completely like stone faced. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I do think it mattered a lot, specifically for Lass and Nika. Actually, I think the crowd gave them like a lot of confidence and a lot of momentum, and I feel like that kept them engaged in the games, and I think it was good for sure.
So to my knowledge, you've won 2 Smite World Championships. Obviously the one in season 10, but also in 2018 with E United, I believe.
Hmm.
If you could turn your experience and feelings into words, how does it feel winning a world championship for you?
Um, Honestly, mostly relief. Like, it's kind of a lame answer because I feel like it should be a better feeling than that, but I'm the like I hate losing more than I like winning type of person. So I think season 10 it was mostly relief and like validation, I think, more than anything. Whereas season 4 I think was a little bit more of a like a feeling of like euphoria, I guess. It was kind of surreal, like it didn't really sink in for a long time because we like just weren't supposed to win, like nobody would have picked that team to win, or that team to like be as good as we ended up being. And yeah, they were 2 very different experiences. I think the best thing about it for sure is just like it's the team like camaraderie, I guess. Like both of those teams had a lot of like conflict and a lot of struggles throughout those years leading up to those worlds, and I think that's the best feeling of like being a group and being a team and working together and like overcoming all of those things and like knowing how much you bickered and argued with one another, um and then to like have the feeling of like we did it together sort of thing. That's the best part of it for sure.
I agree. Yeah, that's one of my favorite parts about like being on a team, even if it's not professionally. It's just, like kind of getting to sort of hang out with the boys, even like scrimming. It's
For
like I
sure.
kind of like scrimming to get better, but also I'm just like kind of chilling with the boys.
Yeah.
So I gotta ask, did your competitive journey come to an end on that world stage, or will we be seeing you compete in Smite 2?
um I don't know. I doubt Smite 2 esports will be the scale that Smite 1 was, at least initially. Who knows how time will change. Um, my plan is that that would be the end of it, but I mean, things could change. Who knows? Like, it really depends. The hard thing with Smite 2 is I'm more optimistic. Like, I think they had the showcase like yesterday or something. I still have to look into all of that, but it seems like people are getting more and more optimistic, which is really good. And I know they're working really hard on the game. So if I like it and there is a competitive scene and it feels like it makes sense for me, then I would definitely consider it. But I think I'm at like a peaceful like stopping place as well. So I lean more towards that side of like it being the end of it.
Yeah, sort of like end off on a win.
Honestly, not even that as much as just like it's not that the passion is different. Like I love the passion for grinding games isn't the same as it used to be, but I do have a lot of passion for like everything we just talked about, like the team element, that type of stuff. Like I could see myself coaching for sure. But playing as much, I'm not as sure.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I feel like you'd be a really good coach.
I think I would enjoy coaching. Yeah.
Have you ever like thought about also being like an analyst on the desk? Maybe.
I have, but I don't know if I've talked Hindu is that's gone back and forth. He wouldn't care if I said it, but like I literally season 4 we won worlds, and then that off season he asked me if I would. He literally offered me to be a caster at the time because they needed help, and he's like, "Hey, if any reason you want to retire, you could come be a caster." And I was like, fuck off, basically, because we had just won. I do think it would be fun, but I also think if it was between that and coaching, I think I'd have more fun with like the coaching side of it for sure.
Mike, so you're a known leader on and off the field. You can hear in the comms, and when I was talking with Nika, he was saying how important of a role you played in making sure everyone was getting better, both individually and as a team. Where do you think that comes from? Do you think that's a personality trait that you've had since you were young, or was it sort of developed over time?
I think both. It definitely is kind of like an infatuation with traditional sports. I really like I just like sports and team stuff in general. Like I grew up playing team sports my whole life, like year round. So I think part of that, but I also think so season 4 when I joined that United team, I went into it thinking like I played with Chaos in the Challenger Cup, like the team that I said we won like every week together. Chaos was my mid laner on that team. So when we played together in the SPL, I kind of knew like what he was like. He is still the most try hard person I've ever met in my life. Like super hard worker, super like dedicated guy, just like awesome person to be around. So I kind of went into that team environment thinking like, oh, they have leadership, they have like all these things. I can just focus on like they just didn't like playing with each other. They just had a lot of like behind the scenes like drama and arguments, stuff like that. So I went into that team with like, I'm just gonna make it fun. Like I'm just gonna make everybody have a good time. I'll like try to keep the energy like up. I'll try to keep it lighthearted. I'll try to make sure everyone like feels good coming to scrim, feels good coming to practice. Like we want to hang out together, all that type of stuff. And through that process, I kind of learned how important like team morale and environment and stuff was. And I ended up having to become the leader or whatever on that team because Chaos well, one, it just wasn't the same dynamic that I thought it was, and also Chaos ended up graduating and then taking his job with High Res to become like a programmer and stuff, and that's when we picked up Ven. But hold on one sec. Sorry, I don't know if you heard that. My like thing had an alarm go off.
Oh, no worries, no worries.
But yeah, what I learned through that process is that the out of game stuff was just as important, if not honestly more important, as the in game stuff. And I think learning a lot about like the team morale and just having things be fun, I think that's what really escalated it. And I think that carried over a lot to like those rival Ghost years, especially when we had all moved and everything was in person and you're together. I think like that team camaraderie really mattered a lot. And that part was something I had to work on for sure. Like Panda Cat, actually, the biggest thing that he kind of gave to me and Scream is Scream and I used to take losses so hard. Like we would just like, it'd be like the end of the world, like we'd have to figure everything out. It felt awful to lose. Like we would spend the whole day like trying to figure stuff out. And Panda was just a very calm, confident, like sometimes you don't play your best, sometimes you're playing good players and they just play better than you that day. And like, you don't have to overthink it and you just move on and you'll do better next time. And it was like, it's not like at the time we're just like, no, it's worse than that, all this, it's like the end of the world. But he was right. And like learning how to take things a little bit slower and not be like too high or too low. I think that along with like making the atmosphere fun, that kind of like blended all in together. And then I think throughout my career, it was really easy for me to like help each person differently, if that makes sense. Like, the way I would talk to Dardas is totally different than the way I would talk to like Laspra, for example, in like a leadership sense or in a like giving them confidence sense. So I think that part is a learned skill for sure. Like you just have to do it and learn it.
I feel like that was really good by Panicat to say that, because I feel like it's more of like a consistency thing. If you lose like one or two games that, like he said, right, maybe they're playing better than you, whatever the case. But if it's like consistently you're kind of drawing the short stick, then obviously, something needs to change. That's when you can start maybe overthinking it.
Yeah.
So what initially drove you to want to like learn and really get better at Smite?
Honestly, it was mostly because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I always did like okay in school. I went into like college, I guess, and I had like a good amount of like AP credits, and I would always do well like GPA wise and stuff. And but I just didn't have anything to apply it to. Like I didn't feel passionate about anything, and nothing really like was kind of pulling me towards it. And I had always just played games for fun, and pretty much like when basically I got an offer to play. This was before Aurora left. This was like the spring of season 2. I was literally playing a ranked game at like 2 a.m. on a Friday night, and it was with El Chacho and El Leon, or El Chapo is what he was back then. One of our teammates on that ranked team rage quit. We played a 4v5, won it. The two of them were like, yo, we have a Challenger Cup tournament at 9 a.m. Do you want to go to sleep right now and then sub in for us? Like our like solo laner can't make it. And Burchacho was their support main. He played solo and I played support. We ended up finishing like third. The only teams we lost to were the pro teams. Like they would then become pro teams. It was Legion of Carrots, which was like Pern and Pain Devion, like the team that basically became enemy and made Worlds Finals. And then it was Eager, which was like Aurora and Lassus and Zapman, like the team that I would eventually join. And from there, I just kind of kept getting better and kept getting offers. And I was like, I don't know what I want to do in school. I'm just going to ride this out and see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like, a lot of the times it's probably the best to take the opportunities that are right in front of you instead of wishing for, other opportunities that may or may not happen later down the line as well.
For sure. I think it's also easy I think people could do this with anything, like even if it's in school, like switching majors is something that's like really common. For example, like you can always doubt and second guess yourself. I'm kind of big on like, I don't really ever think it's too late to do something that you enjoy. And I kind of think like, I could look back and be like, oh, maybe it would have been better to like go the normal route of like going to college and like having a full degree, and like maybe you would be better off in one way or another for that. But I think like following what you're passionate about, I think normally ends pretty well, because I think your day-to-day life will just be happier. Like I think you'll enjoy working more. You'll enjoy like what you're like having a purpose for, I guess, every day, like what you're waking up for. And I also think like the experiences I've had, I wouldn't trade for anything. Like it's something that not a lot of people get to say they did. So yeah,
experiences definitely like shape you. And I mean, dude, winning worlds in any game, any title, it's like you said,
for
not a
sure.
lot of people can experience that or do that.
Honestly, even the comp thing aside, like it's really cool. Like the fact that you can just turn on a stream and people will just like, you're like, we'd probably be playing video games as a hobby anyways, right? Like the fact that we can turn on our stream and people that we talk to a lot of the days, or like that we play, or just like our friendly or whatever in our chats, like you can just like hang out with people like every day and just like play games and all vibe and like do the same thing that you enjoy together. Like that's a really, really cool and unique thing.
Yeah, definitely. The only time in history that you can actually do that.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
awesome.
Right. Yeah.
Was there ever a point where you felt like giving up playing Smite, or like giving up during the climb to success?
Literally right before I joined United. So we were actually, there were 2 points. They were both spring splits. Season 3, a bunch of people role swapped to support. Like I think Kiki was a mid laner on the like AFK/NV team, and he role swapped to support. Snoopy role swapped to support from ADC. And then Jigs also was a coach of TSM at the time, and then he got a spot on Sora as a support. So I was like literally on the second place team in NA for my whole like rookie year, basically, that I played. And I just like didn't get a good team spot because there were so many role swaps and stuff. And I definitely wasn't as good back then. I definitely think I was definitely better than a lot of people who ended up getting spots. It's easy to say that in hindsight as well, to be fair. But like, yeah, that was pretty tough, because the bad part about being on a losing team wasn't that we were losing, it's that people just didn't care the same. Like back then, it wasn't the same level of like professionalism. Like a lot of people, it was like unironically like just like a part-time thing for people. There were a lot of like students and stuff, which is like, it was still cool and it was still a good experience, but it was very different to like once you see the other end of it. And I was on a professional team at the start who like took it very seriously, and we practiced a lot, and we were like, winning a lot of games and competing to like win tournaments. Going from that to like, oh, just ease up a little bit and care less, it's not really something I could do. So that was really difficult. And then Season 4, I think I just had a lot of stuff going on in my personal life that was kind of like getting me down, and I started like second guessing like if I should go to school or if I should keep playing Smite. Um, and I think I had quit I stepped down from the Allegiance team that was season 4 spring because I just like wasn't having fun, wasn't enjoying the team environment. We weren't doing that well. But it was more so like not having fun and not like not wanting to go scrim. That was the first time I ever like felt that. For me, that was always like that was the thing of the day I was like looking forward to. Like I wanted to go like hang out with my teammates and like practice and get better. So yeah, that was kind of the main moment that was difficult, and then just opportunities ended up coming up and kind of saving that.
Definitely. No, I know it's like a struggle, not just for you, but like for players in general, of course, when they're grinding and, grinding and things like that happen.
For sure.
What are some of the most common mistakes that you've seen other support players make? I know, like there's been like a few games where it's like you've gone back and like VOD reviewed some players, like why is this guy doing this and all that kind of stuff.
I don't know how to say this without sounding like an ass. I'm gonna use Neil actually because I know I can be an asshole to Neil because he is a good friend. Neil is the best example of this by far. Like if you play any video game with Neil, the guy is a sick at like every game he plays. Like he's just a really good like mechanical player, super smart dude, like great teammate. Like everything in your brain that tells you Neil should be nuts is just like true. Like everything about him, he's just like awesome dude. But Neil would just do the shit all the time where he just like would let himself be like put into a really bad matchup, and then he would just like have no control over the game, and you could just like roll over him that way, like just letting yourself be counterpicked super easily. Like not even letting yourself be counterpicked. Like I would blind pick and then he would pick a counter into my blind pick, like he would counter himself, like some random stuff like that. Or just like the most common one by far, especially in ranked, is people like not farming, just thinking that they're not supposed to farm. Neil would also do that too, which is why I picked him as an example. Like
Yeah.
there's a meme of Neil being down like 6 levels, but it like legitimately can lose you the game, like if you're playing like Xing Chen or something, which is a character he played a lot, or like Kuzumbo is a better example. Like those characters need to be tanky. Like if you play Kuzumbo and you're trying to reflect damage to people and you're level 11 and their mid laner is level 20, you're not reflecting anything. You're just dead in like one spell, those are definitely the most common things. Is not like understanding matchups at a pro level. That'd be like the pro specific thing. And a lot of that's just experience. Like again, if you play against like me or Aurora who have played for 10 years, we're just going to know we've played every matchup probably hundreds of times. Like it's just an experience thing. The farm thing is like an overall, like if you're a ranked player and you're like giving up waves or you're just like not playing them out properly, like it's just, you're just going to be worse off for it.
Yeah, definitely. What tips would you give any aspiring support players, especially those aspiring to get into the Smite 2 comp scene as a support main?
The farm one for sure. And when I say farm, I don't mean sit in mid lane and do nothing. The thing I would always talk about is trying to be around the map, like based on timers. So for example, right now I think Bull Demon King is really broken. I would try to be at like, if you were trying really hard to win the game, try to be on every Bull Demon King spawn. Like try to ward it, try to like get your teammates to be there, like try to ping it, or try to type like, hey, I want to like fight this Bull Demon King, or hey, I want to get this. If your ADC has pressure, trying to like help them invade purples off cooldown. If nothing is going on at all, try to help your mid laner get mid harpies. Like just try to like progress your team and help your teammates get more farm, and you should be splitting with them while doing that, and then you just naturally get ahead as support. So that's the main one for sure. The other one is to be a little bit like, first one's farm, second one is only play when you're having fun. Like if you're raging, just take a break. Like that would apply to every role. I think like you can't grind if you're just raging. Like you need to have fun to get better. And the third one that is probably support specific is you will get flamed a lot if you are a ranked support player. You're just like ranked supports and junglers are for sure just the scapegoats every time. I would just like ask questions to people if you watch Twitch, if you watch streams, and just like think for yourself like what you think you could do better. Like it's important to like, did you use your relics well that fight? Like are you upgrading your relics enough during games? Are you like playing with your backline properly? Can you even help your backline? Like if you can't peel their team, like let's say they have like a Kamazotz, if you can't do anything to them, like should you be diving with your soul laners? Like just ask yourself questions. Like, think about what you could be doing better.
Yeah, I played a game against you yesterday. You're playing Giannis support. You're on your little
course,
Giannis
yeah.
support,
Yeah.
and I forgot. I think your jungler, your Humbats did like 9K, and then post game
my
chat,
God.
you're just like, guys, I'm the reason Humbats did 9K or something like that.
My whole team was flaming that guy. I didn't type a word to him. My whole team is flaming him, blaming for everything. Like, wow, this guy didn't gank anyone. Oh my God, he's missing everything. He's so bad. I didn't type a word to him. And then in rebuttal to my other 3 teammates flaming him, he goes, "Why are you mad at me? We have a Janus support." And then I went off on him. He deserved it at that point. I was on his side. What, he did it to himself. So yeah.
Yeah, no, you're right. Support's the scapegoat for sure. So for players in general, in any role, a lot of people talk about when getting better. A lot of people talk about VOD reviewing, playing the game, and while all those things matter and can help one improve, was there anything that worked for you in particular? Some sort of like secret sauce that you really think enabled you to get to the highest level?
Honestly, the playing when you're having fun thing the most. So when I came up, my friend group that I played with a lot, like especially if people are older, they'll know some of these names, but like I used to like literally every day it would be like me, Baskin, Vedium, Benji, Walrus, Wubbin. I'm sure there's other people that I'm missing out on, but like anyways, we had like pretty much every single rookie in the SPL, like season 2 and season 3 were all like the same friend group. We played a lot of rank together, all that type of stuff. And we would just like hang out. We would like play arena together, and you're kind of like we weren't all on teams together, so we're like kind of pushing each other because while we're all friends, we also like want to beat each other. And when you're playing together, you're also like trying to like get better than the other people that you're playing with, like both mechanically and just everything. So like it was kind of a really cool dynamic of sorry if you can hear the vacuum outside.
No worries.
But yeah, like every single day was really fun because we were having fun playing together, but also pushing each other. And it was like a really good balance of like hanging out with friends, but also wanting to be better than your friends. And I think that pushed it really far. I think playing ranked with people as well is really good. Like I used to play a lot of ranked with like Homie Faye, for example. And that was really fun too, because even though again, we're on like different teams and you can't really like help each other a ton because you're competing against each other. It was just fun to like be grinding the game and like playing a lot with people who were also trying to get better and were kind of like minded in that way. And I think it just made it a lot easier and a lot more fun to put the hours in.
Definitely. Competition breeds competition.
Yeah.
So what about for IGLing? I feel like it's one of the most important skills to have as a competitive player, especially if you want to become a support main. I feel like, that or jungle has some of the most impact because of rotations. But I feel like it helps you stand out from the competition as well. If you're trying to get picked out, it's like this guy can IGL, these guys can't. So you're obviously very good at it. We talked earlier about your leadership skills, but for the average player looking to get better at communication when it comes to a team-based environment, is there any advice that you can give them?
Playing comp, any form of it is definitely the best for it. Like, even if it's lower level, like community tournaments or something, just like signing up by yourself and doing those sort of things, I think are really helpful. I think you just kind of have to be willing to make mistakes. Like any person who's making calls or trying to plan out a game, like you're going to mess up, you're going to be wrong. Sometimes you're going to make mistakes. You're going to throw the game. You just kind of have to be willing to do all of that. And, sometimes you'll have teammates, especially if they're not like actually on your team, like if they're just a random like ranked player or something, you're going to have people that flame you for it and blame you for the game. And you just have to like be fine with that. And I think if that doesn't bother you and that's something that you want to get better at is like IGLing and like being the main caller for a team, you just got to be willing to mess up.
Yeah, no, I think that's very well said. I know oftentimes like when I try to IGL and I mess up a call, I'm just like, damn it. Like, and then people kind of like lose trust in you a little bit and you don't want that.
Yeah. I mean, that's honestly in a team atmosphere, that's the hardest thing for sure is like having everyone buy into it. Like the most frustrating moments for me would be, again, I feel like I can tell the story because it's over now, so it doesn't matter. I raged at last, like right before Worlds, because I made a call and he like hesitated or second guessed on it and then like didn't do what I said basically. And then we ended up like throwing the play. And I wasn't mad that like we threw the play or whatever. What I was annoyed at was like the hesitation. And like we talked about it afterwards, and I was like, did I like could I have worded it better? Did you not know what I meant? And he was like, oh no, well I just thought like maybe this other option could be good. And then we like had a discussion. I was like, okay, well what about that play? Do you like compare to like what I said or whatever? And we went back and forth. And I think I was annoyed, and what I ended up saying to him is, if no one else is making calls and I'm the one making calls, and I'm the one who like is trying to like actually make a game plan, the worst thing you can do is like hesitate or like go against it in the moment. Like just listen to it. If I'm wrong, it's not like I won't say that I'm wrong. We'll all learn from it. But like if you don't have everyone on the same page and everyone's not confident in it, then you're just screwed from the start. Like you just need people to actually trust into it, and getting everyone to buy in is like for sure the hardest part, especially if you're struggling. So yeah, I mean, if you're a person who is okay with making the mistakes, but more importantly, you like actually learn from it and you're okay with owning that and you don't like deflect it on other people, those are like the biggest things you need for sure.
Yeah, some of the best qualities. Do you feel like, for Smite in general, do you feel like it's best to IGL from like support and jungle, or do you think it's like better to have more team wide communication?
I think jungle is the best role for it. I actually think in later years, mid actually would have been the best role for it,
Really?
but I don't think any of the mid laners were really that good at doing it. I think Dardas did it a lot for, so like the way our team dynamic worked was I would try to like do the overall game plan, like map play, that type of stuff. And I think in the late game, you kind of need your carries to be the voices when it comes to like sieging and like doing fire giant and stuff. Like if they don't feel safe to step up and hit objectives, like that's a problem. You need to know what they think. You need to know like who they need help with, who they need to be kept out of the fight, like how they want fights to start so that they can get their damage off. Like I think in later seasons, like specifically seasons 8, 9, 10, that was really the main style of the pro league, where just mid laners were just ahead of everybody. They were like the main carries on the map. Like you said earlier, they were just also like the objective secure. So they were just a really, really core part of your team. And for us, our comps were basically built off of Dardaz's God Pool as well. Like sometimes we would play like Erlang Shen and the Morgan and like Hera, and we'd be playing dive comps. Or sometimes we're playing Kakakin and we're waiting for 50 minutes to play the game. So I actually think because of that, mid lane had a lot of like character stylistic differences that made that role really good for shot calling. I think that's actually a really big reason the Warriors were as good as they were, is because Pegon, I think, stepped up in that way, and he was like their playmaker and also like a loud voice on that team and somebody who would lead them. So I would actually say right now, I would say like jungle, mid, then support is the best, but I do think anyone but the side laners really, just because they don't get to see the whole map like the other three do.
Right. But you also had Cyclonespin as well, right? That was making a lot of the calls, and he was ADC.
Yeah, that guy's just different. He kind of fits like the thing I was saying about the late game stuff. Like he would do a lot of their late game calling because, like I said, like you have to know when you can hit objectives or what plays you can do.
Yeah.
Cyclone also has like, I didn't learn this until afterwards. Aurora told me it, but Cyclone also had this like sick thing that he did, which was he learned how many Primal Furies you needed as a team for his Chernobog build for him to be able to solo FG by himself, because the Primal Fury would make him do more damage. It would make him lifesteal more, and he knew exactly how much lifesteal he needed to have and what stage of the game he needed to be so that he could solo FG. And literally at Worlds in game 1, we lost a fire because we saw all 4 of them, other than Cyclone, on wards, and we thought he was split pushing in duo, and we just didn't react to it, and we were just waiting, and he just soloed FG, and we just lost an EFG at like 40 minutes because he just knew it. Like they literally got like a third Primal Fury, and that was like the go button. That's all they needed. I would have never thought of that in a million years, but Cyclone is just sick in the head, and that's like stuff that he figures out. So yeah, that guy's just different because of that. But I think most of their early game and stuff was Sino and Baskin.
So I know we kind of like briefly touched upon this earlier when it came to advice, but was there ever one player in particular that pushed you to become a better player? Maybe
Aurora.
in like Aurora? Yeah.
Just Aurora, yeah. A lot of it's the experience thing. We've talked to each other about it a good bit. Like, it's just the nature of like being in the same region. Pretty much every single year, our teams were the top 2 teams in NA. Even in later years, like we were competing every single tournament to like win it. Like I think there's some like crazy stat, but I think like the past like I think there were only 3 tournaments that one of me and Aurora didn't win, like the last 4 years or something like that. It was like the Levi's won Worlds and the Kings won 2 tournaments, and that was like it. Every single other tournament was won by like me and Aurora. And I think it's just that. Like, it's just we played against each other for so long. We like had times where we would each get owned by the other person or the other person's team or whatever was going on. I think there's like always been a lot of like mutual respect, but we're also different. Like, we're very like, for example, I only played Herc in season 7, and it was because I regretted like not playing it season 6. He was the only person to play it, and I remember thinking like season 6 finals, Twig got target banned because we were playing a lot of like we would play double hunter with a magic jungler. We'd play like Pops, Athena, Hebo, and they just triple banned Twig. They banned all of our magical junglers, and then like our comps just had to change entirely. And I was like, man, if I just made people ban Herc, like our drafts are different because now we get one of those junglers guaranteed every single game. So that was like a regret that I had. And it's just like learning from him and going back and forth. And I think we did that a lot. And it's just like, I think also adapting to different play styles. Like, the two of us just changed a lot over the years. Like, nobody would watch me in season 4, season 3. I was playing like Kepri Terra and Fafnir exclusively. No, like no one would watch that player and then think, oh yeah, this guy's gonna play like Herc, Ardio, Fenrir, Serket only, and like play the dive carries, and then think that later on I'm gonna play like Aphrodite and Baron and stuff like that. And same thing for him. Like, he was like the original like Fenrir Ares main, and then he ends up playing like he like mained Sylvanas for a whole season, and then he's like Year of the Elephant mode last year. Like, just so many different like playstyle adaptations, and it was just like learning and going back and forth. So Aurora for sure.
Yeah, and like listening to this too, it like probably makes winning or beating in the semifinals the Ferrymen just that much more fulfilling too for you. Like, not only were they probably the hardest team, but just beating Aurora as well.
Honestly, the last 2 years, because we never played each other at Worlds ever. And then both season 9 and season 10, we played each other in semis. Both sets went to 5 games, and one of us won one, and the other one won the other. So like that was kind of surreal to us too. That we never played each other at Worlds, even though every single year we were on like the 2 best teams in NA before the leagues merged. And then even then we were like 2 of the top teams like every single year, and we just never played each other. Kind of weird how that worked out.
Yeah, definitely. Just 2 more questions for you, Mike. If you could rate the roles from 1 to 5, 1 being the hardest and 5 being the easiest, what would you rate each one?
1 being the hardest?
Yeah,
Or
1 being
5
the
being the
hardest.
hardest? Okay, 1 being hardest. Jungle, support, 1, 2. I think sometimes those are interchangeable, but I think more jungle. Probably solo 3, specifically because of lane matchups. I think lane matchups, and also I think it's really easy to int late game as a solo laner. And then probably ADC, and then mid 5 is what I would think. Those 2 are interchangeable, depends on the year, but yeah.
Yeah, mid big circles, right?
Well, the main thing with mid is that you kind of like live and die by your team. So it's like kind of unfair to those players a little bit. Like, I think mid has the easiest floor, where you have that role has the most like uninterruptible farm. Like, people can't really do anything to stop you from like pretty much every single seasons like 8 through now. Like, you have a back harpy camp or a red buff or something that's like literally right next to you. You could literally sit under your tower and pull your jungle farm to yourself and get all of your farm and not miss anything. Obviously you have range clear, so you never have to worry about like losing gold under tower, for example. You just have more farm located around that lane. So like, if you do have a good jungler and you do have a good support and they're winning their matchups, the mid laner is the one who gets fed. It's not the other 2. Like, it's the mid laner is the one who gets to go get all the mid harpies, get all of the invade camps, like all of that type of stuff. So mid, I think, kind of lives and dies by their team. It's not really the player's fault, but like, worst case scenario, they can just play Merlin Tiamat, AFK farm until 20, and then do 1 million damage.
Yeah, thinking back to that Shinto and Panatom little duo, where Shinto's just taking all his farm.
Yeah. I think I would stay on mid 5 specifically. I do think the hardest thing to do in the SPL like period is use like your beads and Aegis perfectly against like coordinated teams. Like, it's sometimes you just can't live. Like, there's just nothing you can do. If they like get a good engage on you, you're just dead. I think it's slightly easier to do that for mid laners than it is for hunters as well, because mid laners can like use their kit, then use their Aegis, and then like buy time for their second round of cooldowns to come up and use it. Whereas like a hunter being able to get your damage off and use your relics is really, really difficult to do. Like I think that job is really tough. And then same thing with like ADCs are the one who have to like kill phoenixes and like know when they can die or like, you know, burn fires and stuff. Whereas like, you know, you can Vulcanaut fire from like a mile away, you know? So I think ADC solo, I'd be closer to them being interchangeable. I think mid is kind of hard locked, easiest role personally.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, I lied. Actually, now we're in the final two questions.
Sure. I'm gonna do whatever, man.
If you couldn't play support, what other role out of the other four would you prefer to play?
Jungler mid. Only I would refuse. I would never want to play the side lanes. I just think you're not involved in the game enough. Like honestly, I get annoyed as it. Like I'm sure you've had it in scrims too, when like a side laner just isn't talking at all, or they're just like dying to ganks that are like warded or they know are coming. And honestly, sometimes it's like it's hard to blame them. Like I can't imagine being a side laner and scrimming, and the other side of the map just loses the game, and you just never even get to like play. Basically, like you never get to team fight, you never get to like do anything. It just sounds miserable. So I would never want to do that. Probably jungle. I would want control of the map the most, but I think jungle has the least. If it was like a tank jungle meta, I could do it because I would just play a lot of like characters that I would play in support. But yeah, I think character fun wise, mid is I think like the most fun role for sure, especially later seasons. Now that they got to play like assassins and stuff, like I think they just have a lot of really fun characters.
Yeah, and mages are like literally the most characters out of any other class.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so this like podcast has been filled with so much advice that you've given. It's awesome. Given all of your experiences and expertise, to wrap it up, what is the absolute best piece of advice you think that you could give to someone listening to this, just in general too? It doesn't just have to be for Smite, but just like life in general.
I think just try to enjoy whatever you're doing. I think especially it's easy for people to do this. Like you'll see it with like, you know, Smite 2 and people being worried about that. And just like second guessing yourself with whatever you want to do in life, whether it's like, you know, you're a kid and you're going through school and you don't know what you want to do in college or, you know, anything like that. I think just following what you enjoy is something I really believe in. I think it's really easy to look back and like second guess every single decision. But I think if you're waking up every day and you enjoy what you're doing and you're having fun with it and it feels important to you, then I just believe in chasing that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, thank you so much, man. It's been an absolute pleasure and honor to have you here. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this with me.
Yeah, it was a good time. Thanks for having me on.